The people that are going to be helpful to me, the people that are going to be more receptive and knowledgeable about what I do are music people. That's really what I do. And the tour is just the delivery system for this information that I've accumulated.
Welcome to the Tourpreneur podcast. Travel industry veteran Shane Whaley will take you on a journey with fellow tourpreneurs, sharing their tips, ideas, insights, and success stories to inspire you to make your tour business the best it can be. And now, please welcome your host, Shane.
Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the Tourpreneur podcast. Thank you for joining us. Today we have a really exciting story to bring you. Today's tourpreneur is Jesse Rifkin, and we're going to learn how Jesse turned his passion for music and music history into not just a thriving tour business, but now a full-time business. And he's only been up and running for 8 months. So there's lots of inspiration in this episode for us. Now, he is the tourpreneur behind Walk on the Wild Side Tours. I will add the link to today's show notes, which you can find at tourpreneur.com/20. They are New York City walking tours for music nerds. See where your favorite artists lived, performed, rehearsed, and recorded the records you love. Now, I was very lucky to go on one of Jesse's tours. People are always surprised about me. If you look at my picture on the About page or we've met somewhere, people always assume that I'm conservative looking with a small C, right? People are always very shocked when I tell them that I love punk rock and I love indie rock and heavy rock. So I went on the Birth of Punk tour and absolutely loved it. You know, we talked about people like Patti Smith, the New York Dolls, David Bowie, the Ramones, Lou Reed, Talking Heads, Television, Blondie, the Cramps, they were all in there. It's a fantastic tour. So I'm really excited to bring you this conversation with this young man who has taken his nerdery for music and built this full-time business. Let's go across to Jesse Rifkin.
Hey, oh, let's go. Hey, oh, let's go. You're in already. You might as well stay a while.
Welcome to episode 20 of the Tourpreneur podcast, Jesse. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. This is really cool because I got to go on your tour last week. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I've been recommending it to everybody, especially my friends back in England who love punk and
thank you.
music. And they're all like, yeah, we were really surprised when we were in New York last. I pulled up the address for CBGB's and it was some clothes shop.
Yeah.
And I said, you need to go on Jesse's tour because he shows you around the back where the Ramones took their photographs against the wall. The guy's like, really? We didn't know it was there. So, really, really cool. So do you want to tell me a little bit about how you got started?
Yeah. I mean, the background for me, I was a musician. I played in bands for like 15 years. I played all these places. I played CBGB. I toured a ton. And at a certain point, it just, it was time to try to find something else to do. And I was already this big, obsessive music geek and history geek. I had read all these books and I'd done a lot of this research just for myself. There was a period of time where I was kind of down on New York. I think a lot of people get down on New York when just other things are going on. It's very easy to blame the city and feel like, you missed out on the good stuff. And so I started doing all this research, and the more research I did, the more I felt like I was part of a larger, longer continuum, and that ironically, everybody sort of feels like they missed out on the good stuff. It gave me a sense of perspective. Like almost every person that I researched kind of thinks New York got bad when they turned 28, which is really makes you reconsider the experience. And so I was just walking around finding the stuff that I was reading about and, looking it up on maps. And at a certain point, something just sort of clicked. Like I was sitting at a Chinese restaurant and just boom, it was like, oh, this could be a tour. I could do this. This could be fun.
Yeah.
And it is. It's been great fun ever since.
Did you talk to any friends about it first before you decided to jump in?
Yeah, I was with my wife at the restaurant when I had the idea. And she was immediately like, yes, that's great. We started sitting there, looking up what it took to become a tour guide. And then as I was sort of developing the tours, before I opened for business, I had some good friends of mine come and take sort of, sample trial versions of the tour, which was immensely, immensely helpful, just in terms of kind of refining my ideas and illustrating my blind spots to me.
Sure. That's good advice for people out there that are wanting to start tours. And I wanted to share with our listeners who aren't familiar with you. Currently, you offer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 specific tours, but then you also have custom availability for tours. So you have the Birth of Punk tour, post-punk, disco, and hip-hop downtown tour, the indie rock tour, Sonic Youth's New York tour, Arthur Russell's New York tour. So, a bit of everything there. What was the first tour you started with?
The first tour I started with was actually the post-punk disco and hip-hop tour, and that's still my favorite one to do. It's a story that doesn't usually get told that way.
Yeah.
Like, people tend to focus on one kind of segment of that,
Yeah.
I kind of focus on the neighborhood and the time period. It's Soho and Tribeca in the late 70s and 80s. All these genres were, influencing each other and inspiring each other and kind of coexisting side by side. And it often doesn't get talked about that way, or it's treated more as background information. Kind of looking at it all on a map and walking it out, I was able to draw a lot of connections that just don't really get drawn in books or in retellings. And so as soon as I mapped that one out and just started saying where everything was, that was the real, oh, this could really work. I could really do this. And nobody really does a tour like that,
Yeah.
I knew I was onto something.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit later on about discovery and how I discovered your tours. But I lived in New York and I wasn't aware. And I love this music, especially punk. People are always surprised about that about me because it seems quite, conservative, small C. But I love my punk. So I was really excited to find your tours.
I've been impressed by the range of people who have come to me,
Yes.
This music is much more universal. It has a much wider reach than I think people assume it does.
Absolutely. And it's more than just the Ramones, a lot of people I know that they go deeper. So I have to be careful here. I don't turn this into a music podcast because,
Fair enough.
So you had the post-punk tour. And then at what point did you think, well, actually, there's scope here for other tours and other people are looking for different things? How far were you down the road when you started developing other tours?
Pretty quickly. Like, once I realized that could be a tour, then I just started sort of like brainstorming, what else could be a tour?
Yeah.
I still have this 60-page Word document of just every address of everything relevant that I found in the entire city. And then kind of started going down the list and saying like, oh, what's close together? What makes sense? And then, I start mapping things out and walking them and sort of seeing where a narrative emerges. I think the narrative is really the key.
Yeah, and I think that's what I particularly enjoyed about the tour we went on last week was you built that whole story. And for those who don't know, there was a hotel where there was a lot of ballrooms and a lot of these acts were playing in the very early days, which collapsed. Jesse was sharing with me the story about how the hotel collapsed. What was the name of the hotel again? Was it Grand?
It was the Grand Central Hotel. For a while, it was also called the Broadway Central Hotel or the Hotel University. Had a few incarnations, but mostly the Grand Central Hotel.
Sure, which is a bit embarrassing that I've worked in hotels for almost 2 decades and I'd never heard of this.
I mean, it's kind of an obscure story, surprisingly,
Yeah.
But the theater was called the Mercer Arts Center. They had several working theaters in the back of this hotel that were kind of home to like glam rock and early New York punk.
And Jesse was explaining, so the hotel collapsed. And structurally, it was a nightmare. The whole thing collapsed. And then all these bands had nowhere to go, so they all went off in different directions. And that's where you saw the birth of different, of punk, but also different, Blondie went off. And who else was playing in there? It was Velvet Underground. And
well, the Velvet Underground preceded it a little bit, but it was like the New York Dolls and Suicide. A lot of people who later went on to become punk bands, people like members of the Ramones and Television and Blondie, Patti Smith. They were all hanging out at this place. Some of them were playing in, earlier bands that they were in. But it was only really after the Mercer Arts Center or the hotel collapsed that they were kind of like, all right, let's regroup.
And I love the fact you pointed out a Chinese restaurant that I've gone and eaten in that was, the hangout, the bar for a lot of, big names back in the day. And of course, I've sat and eaten in there and had no idea. Yeah, so these were some of the nuggets of information I got on your tour. So talk me through, because we have a lot of people who listen to Tourpreneur who are what I call tourpreneurs in waiting. So they've got an idea, a bit like you did, and they're like, well, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know what I've got to do. So once you decided that, okay, the post-punk tour, I think this can go somewhere, what were your next steps?
I sort of very gradually started researching what the requirements would be to become a tour guide in the city, to start a business on my own. I've never run a business before.
Yeah.
Not in this sense. Although I did discover pretty quickly that spending as much time as I did playing in bands really did prepare me for this substantially. Like, if you spend that long dealing with people in the music industry who are just, by and large, just the most inept people in the world, then like everything else is comparatively just a walk in the park.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you had that experience, but then where did you go to find out, for instance, okay, I want to run a tour in New York City. Where did you go to find out what the requirements were?
I think I just Googled New York City tour guide requirements.
Right.
And I discovered that there was an exam you had to take. And so I spent a couple months studying for this exam. I wanted to make sure I did it one step at a time, because I knew that if I didn't get the license, then everything else was just like not going to happen. So I studied for the exam. I took the exam, got the license. Once I did that, I went to the business office where you say, like, I'm doing business under this name, and I registered the business name. And then once I did that, I registered a website, started building the website, got insurance. But it was very much like jumping in. I knew that it was going to be overwhelming if I didn't do it very, very meticulously and very slowly.
So I like the advice here, Jesse, of, it can be overwhelming, but to take it one step at a time rather than try and get everything done in a week.
There was no rush. Nobody was waiting for this. It was just,
oh, but we were.
Well, yeah, but, nobody. There wasn't a calendar that I was trying to adhere to, and I wanted to make sure I took the time to really refine what the tours were before I even, built the website, before I got the business name. If the product isn't excellent going in, then this whole thing might not work.
And I admire you, because it's not like, oh, I'm going to do a history walking tour or bus tour of New York or whatever, that, there are 5 or so other competitors out there. I mean, you were creating something. It's a bit like this podcast, there was nothing else like out there.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can go on someone else's tour and take notes. Go, oh, I like what they did there. I didn't like what they do there. That's what I can do differently. So I really admire you in building like a really unique tour.
Thank you. Like, I'm not the only person in New York that does music tours, but I think the realization that I had that kind of made this all work is that there's an audience, and I know this audience because I am this audience, of people who want something that's not surfacey, that people are going to want to focus in more on specific stories, on specific genres and time periods, as opposed to just like, here's all the music landmarks.
Well, I knew you were going to be a really great resource when we talked briefly before I came on your tour, and we were talking about an artist called Jobriath.
Yeah.
We talked about this on the tour itself. Not many people know about Jobriath and his whole story. So I knew that this wasn't going to be a superficial tour.
Right.
But I want to go back to the exam you took, because I have no clue what that exam looks like.
Oh, my God.
How relevant was it to your business?
Not like really at all. It was like taking the SATs all over again, man.
Oh, wow.
It was really pretty stressful. And it's just like, how many feet tall is the Empire State Building? So I guess I know that now. But I did feel like it prepared me for this job in the sense that I don't think I understood that I needed to know about things outside of the focus of the tour. That, people were going to be asking me other questions about what they should do, where they should go. when things would and wouldn't be open and available. Just sort of, if I'm leading this tour, even if that's not the thrust of the tour, I am sort of expected to be knowledgeable about the city in a broader sense. And so it forced me to become that.
I never really thought of it like that before, because certainly when we were on the tour, I wasn't going to ask you for, hey, where's a good Chinese restaurant to eat near here, or how do I get back to so-and-so? But I guess, when we are on tours, I went on the Slice of Brooklyn tour after yours, and they were talking about a lot of things that weren't particularly relevant to the tour. They got a lot of questions, but on that bus, you had people from Melbourne, Sydney, etc., and you have that bond with the people, and you build that trust as a really good tour guide, so people trust your recommendations on where to eat, etc. Yes, it makes sense. But how many hours of study did you have to put in for the exam?
Oh God, I want to say like 2 months, just kind of really studying heavily for it. I was able to find some study guides on the internet, which were very helpful. So I wasn't just going in, totally blind.
Is that licensed by the city of New York, or is it by NYC, and is it by the tourist board?
You mean who's giving out the license?
Yeah, sorry.
It's the city business bureau.
Right.
I'm taking the exam in the same room as people taking the exam for like construction licenses.
Right. Wow. Okay. It's interesting because every city has different requirements. Actually, we interviewed a company up in Montreal that was saying there's an 8-month program to be licensed as a tour guide in Montreal, for instance. And then there's some cities where you don't need anything at all.
Yeah, Los Angeles, you don't need anything.
You just need a driving license there.
No, it's...
Did you know every weekday Shane curates the most interesting news articles in tours and activities and sends them out in a snappy daily digest? Grab your copy of the Tourpreneur Daily Briefing at www.tourpreneur.com.
So you've got your license, you've mapped out your tour, you just said you built a website. Was that a skill set you had previously, or how did that look?
Building a website?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was something I knew more or less how to do. Again, all the time I spent in the music industry, I think really prepared me for doing this in a way I didn't expect it to.
Yeah. Can you enlarge on that a little bit?
There's so little money to go around in the music industry at this point that everybody is kind of expected to do everything on their own. So, it's not enough to be a band or a songwriter or multi-instrumentalist. Like, you also have to be your own booking agent for a lot of the time. You have to be your own PR person. You have to be your own, just everything. You have to organize your calendar. You have to know how to like fix broken equipment because you can't really rely on anybody else to do any of it or afford it. So,
well, it's why we call the show Tourpreneur, because it's not just tour operator. I don't really care for that word because I don't think it really says everything that you have to do.
Yeah, I know. But, it turned out that I'd been like running businesses for this entire time and just not really understanding that that's what they were. But I definitely learned what to do and what not to do, how to appeal to audiences, how to not appeal to audiences. I saw a lot of things done well and done poorly in the music world that transferred much, much, much better to this than I imagined they would.
Sure. Now, how long have you been in operation? How many years?
It's about a year.
About a year. So the website I'm looking at now, walkonthewildsidenyc.com, the Squarespace site, was that the first one you built?
Yeah.
It looks really good, I have to say. A couple of tourpreneurs I've been talking to have been using Squarespace.
It has its frustrations, but, it's mostly pretty straightforward.
Great. And that is Squarespace something you would recommend to other tourpreneurs who are looking to start a website?
Yeah, as much as anything.
Right.
I used to use Weebly for band websites and stuff, and I definitely found Squarespace to be better than that.
Yeah. And does it need a lot of technical know-how? Or
not at all.
Right. So that's always good. Great. So you've got the website, you've got your tours mapped out. How did you get your first customers, other than your mates that you showed around for feedback? How did you get your first paying customers?
The first paying customers that I didn't know myself just Googled. They just found me, which was really incredible and encouraging,
Had you written your tour notes and program out with SEO in mind, or was this just organic that Google had indexed you so highly?
A little bit of both, but I think mostly the latter, just because the things that this particular couple that I had come that they were looking for, I'm just the only person that does it. So I'm the only thing that's going to come up.
Yeah, that's great. And then what other marketing channels are you utilizing today in order to get bookings?
Well, I realized, I think pretty quickly going in, that traditional like travel PR, and the channels through which people promote tours by and large weren't really going to matter as much for me, because the audience that exists for this sort of thing, that's just not where they're looking. The people that I'm kind of hoping to draw are people who are obsessed with music, read obsessively about music, Google music stuff constantly, and that's it. So I reached out to a music PR person that I'd worked with before on records that I'd made, and kind of, tentatively like, hey, this might be a little outside of your wheelhouse, but like, what do you think about trying this? And he was very receptive to it. His name is Spencer Scanlon. He's phenomenal. But he and I made a point of trying to reach out to music websites, music journalists, people who are knowledgeable about this stuff, care about this stuff, and would be enthused about a tour like this. And I found them to be, largely very receptive. I know people that I've gotten who have found me through a specific like piece of press or advertising. It's largely been through those channels, through those kind of like, music writer channels.
That's how I found out about you, because, every day I curate the daily brief, which people can find at tourpreneur.com. And I look at the main news in tours and where tours are referenced. And, I pick out interesting ones and send them out every day. And that's where I'd read about Walk on the Wild Side. I can't remember which publication it was. I'll have to dig out my archive. I thought, this is right up my street. Like I'm going to New York in a couple of weeks. I definitely want to do this tour, and I'd love to interview the person behind it. So it worked for me, because as much as I love this music, and it's weird because I work in this industry, I don't know if I would have Googled tours for it. So that's a tricky one for you, isn't it?
I'm still kind of figuring it out, to be honest. I have gotten a number of people who found me through press that we got early on. There was a piece in the New York Times, which was extraordinary.
Right.
There was something in Voters and things like that. And those have brought people in. But there's also people who are looking for this stuff, who are, researching like Velvet Underground tour, punk tour. Like I was running ads on like Facebook and Instagram for a while. And of course, they target it by area as opposed to by like interest or whatever. Or largely they do it by area. And so the only people who were seeing these ads were locals.
Yeah.
And, I got a couple things through that, but by and large, people being like, I used to go to CBGB. Why do I need to see CBGB?
Yeah.
So I'm still really figuring out the best advertising, the best way to kind of have that happen. But, I'm getting enough people just through the channels that exist already to have us be full time, which is extraordinary.
Congratulations. I was really pleased for you when you told me that on the tour.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it feels great.
Yeah, absolutely. And if any of our listeners are in a similar situation to Jesse and you've done something that worked for you in terms of Facebook, especially if you have a more unique tour, I will add Jesse's contact details, social media, etc., on the show notes for today, which are tourpreneur.com/20. Please reach out to him and share your experiences. That
yeah,
would be,
please do.
What we're trying to do here on the show is to share the knowledge and resources.
Absolutely.
Facebook is a tricky one when you're trying to advertise something that people don't know is out there, right?
Exactly. The other thing actually that I found to be really, really effective and helpful is I have an Instagram account, for the company. And every day or most days, I just try to like share not so specifically things about like, hey, I have this tour, come do this tour, but just like old flyers and photos and just kind of, little bits of history, like music history things from around the city, from different decades and genres and eras. And people have gotten excited about that. They've come on board through that. And then I've had people discover me through that account and then come on tours or, tell other people to come on tours. And it's also connected me to some of the people that I talk about on tours, which was shocking surprise. Very nice one.
I'm just thinking, having been on your tour, some of the highlights for me, and there were a lot, but, there was that apartment you showed me which was where Kiss had played their first gig in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And, I just think in terms of social, if you took a picture of that and shared it on your Instagram, say, hey, which band played their first, just making it a bit fun, because that's what really shocked me. Like, oh, they played their first gig up there. And there was a couple other things, which I don't want to go into too much because I want people to come on your tour and experience it for themselves. But, there are some cool things that I think would really surprise people. And again, I'm not an Instagram expert, to be honest, but I wonder if something like that would.
There's been some stuff like that. I've also found it to be helpful. I found the old flyer for that show.
Yeah.
So I just share the flyer and mention like, this is one of the stops on my Birth of Punk tour. I found it to be pretty effective because this information is out there. If you know what you're looking for, it's honestly mostly not that hard to find. People just don't think to find it, or they don't have the time or the energy or the focus to find it. So they can see the flyer, see the address, and just not have it really register like, oh, this is that building.
Yeah, because to be honest, even if I'd pulled out some of those addresses and I tried to do it myself, I'd be like, no, this can't be it. This is an NYU building.
Right.
This can't be where Prince played or whoever it may be. And I have to compliment you that what I really enjoyed about your tour is, you brought the iPad with you, so you were able to show the flyer or show photographs, especially maybe some of the bands that I wasn't familiar with, like Suicide and various others, so I can actually see it. So yeah, I could print this off on Google and go on my own, but it was the way that you had the passion for the subject. We were outside the old CBGBs and we were talking about the Cramps, remember?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that was great.
And some woman walks past and she lived in the same building as the Cramps and she was telling us some stories, it was kind of like, and you can incorporate that in your tour. Yeah. You're not going to find that online, and you're building that up as you go along, and great feedback, right? Yeah. Great to get that.
I mean, honestly, that's far from the first time something like that's happened.
Well, it was that time you had a cup of tea with Blondie, right, on your tour?
Well,
remember that?
No, but people who were around for this stuff, who were still living in Manhattan or working in Manhattan, they hear, a specific band name or venue name or something come out of my mouth, and they kind of like pause and come closer and closer, and I see it happening out of the corner of my eye. Some of them will have something interesting to say. Or like one of the other tours I do, I show Blondie's old apartment. And as I was talking about it, a guy who lives in that building was like going to the door to unlock it. And I saw him kind of like, his ears perk up, and he walked over. He was like, hey, I live in this building. What are you talking about? Can I just listen in real quick? And I said yes. And we kind of got into it. And he told me that there's still somebody that lives in this building who remembered when Blondie lived there and when they rehearsed there. And that person is constantly yelling at this guy and his roommates, saying that they're even louder than Blondie were.
That's great.
Yeah, like that was a priceless moment.
Yeah, no, that's superb. That's superb. Oh, I really enjoy that. Yeah. Like I say, with you having the iPad, I really like that mix, because a lot of the locations have gone or that they've vastly changed. So they're able to see how one of the record stores was. You were telling me where Patti Smith used to hang out, and seeing as it was. And also you were pointing out some of the signs that, I would have missed, but was still there of some venues. And that's what I liked about the tour.
Want to connect with other tourpreneurs? Then join our Facebook group at tourpreneur.com/Facebook.
Take me back to the first tour that you led. So maybe that couple that found you on Google. How did you feel that morning when you knew you were going to be your first professional tour?
It wasn't really that intimidating, just because I'd done it so many times for people I knew already, that I felt like this route is really refined. I know the information. I was pretty confident going in. And then once we started and they started asking questions, I kind of realized like, oh, I might not know quite as much as I think I do. It kind of highlighted for me what my blind spots were, what I needed to go back and refine and memorize. They were asking about specific dates, which has always been kind of the hardest part for me. So it's like, okay, I have to go back. I have to know the dates. Like, that's important. People want that. The last stop of the tour was outside a residential building. And I just, after I did my spiel outside of it, we just stayed there talking. And some woman came outside and shushed us. It was like 8:00, wow. Maybe. I found that to be very informative about how to, like, I can't stand too close to this building because this awful person lives there.
understanding the environment, I think, is an important one. Are you getting any help, or is there any support for you as a tourpreneur with NYC and Co, or any tourist boards or any professional organizations? You getting any support, or are you networking with other tour companies at all?
Not really. I tried to do some networking right when I was starting out. And I told, some people I knew that I was like doing this and dipping my toe into it. A friend of mine kind of passed me along to a friend of hers who is a tour guide and a very involved local tour guide. I do want to prop him up. His name is Jeremy Wilcox, and his company is called Custom NYC Tours. And he's a very, very sweet, very knowledgeable guy. I bought him a cup of tea, and he was really helpful answering questions I had and telling me, what I should and shouldn't be concerned with. And that was just a major development for me. But through that, I got involved with an organization called GANIC, which is the Guides Association of New York City. It's phenomenal because they have a group liability insurance that I've bought into.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and the dues are not especially high, and you can, be listed on their site. I did go to a couple meetings, and it's just like, oh, I'm totally a fish out of water here. The tour guide community, that's technically what I do, but that's not really what my world is. The people that are going to be helpful to me, the people that are going to be more receptive and knowledgeable about what I do are music people, music historians, music writers, music fans, record store people. That's really what I do. And the tour is just the delivery system for this information that I've accumulated. I think finding my niche and sort of figuring out what my niche is and really, really firmly planting my feet there has been the most helpful.
Definitely. I can recommend, and I'll add this to the show notes, there's an organization called Travel Massive. So they are a network worldwide. I'm just looking at their page for New York City. So they have, they say, brings together startups, established travel companies, travel media, journalists, bloggers, PRs, and the travel industry community to meet, network, and talk travel. And I've been a big fan of theirs for a long time because they'll have a meetup once a month. And the reason I'm thinking of it for you, Jesse, is you might meet someone who's running an attraction in New York City who oh yeah, we can recommend your tours.
Yeah,
or in a hotel that would oh yeah, give us your flyers. Maybe, and I don't want to teach you how to suck eggs here, but maybe that would be worth a look.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm still constantly on the lookout for new ways to let people know about this.
Yeah, and then I'm just thinking, people like, Sirius XM, I listen to them in my car, I listen to First Wave, good old Richard Blade, and people like that who might give you a plug or something. Because if I'm listening to First Wave, then I'm definitely your constituency, right?
Right. Well, that's kind of what I was saying. Just people who are looking up music stuff, people who are reading music websites, and who are going to those kinds of information sources. That's who I'm trying to reach.
And then I'm thinking, again, top of my head here, but Morrissey is playing, forget his politics for now, but
it's very hard to forget his politics. But yes.
He is scheduled to be playing, I think, September or October at Forest Hill Stadium. I think he's being supported by Interpol.
Yeah. Well, Morrissey being Morrissey, the odds of it actually happening are 50%.
Yeah, although actually his last tour, I think it was 85%. Yeah, so,
okay.
Who knows, right? But the reason I'm bringing it up is he's obviously covering a Jobriath song, Morning Starship.
Yeah,
it's off his album. Is there a way you could get onto some of the Morrissey Facebook groups or some of those and say, hey, if you're interested in the backstory to this artist, I have this tour.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not trying to teach you how to suck eggs or how to do your job here. Just ideas top of my head.
No, I appreciate that. That's not a bad idea at all. And also, I love the expression "suck eggs." It's
like the first time I've used it on the show. Great. So, what's next for you? What are your next big plans?
So, I'm about to, for the first time since I started doing this, take a couple weeks off because it is 90 degrees in New York City right now.
Yeah, I know.
It's not a great, not a peak tourist time in August. And my plan for that time, some of it I am just spending on vacation, but some of it I'm going to spend really reconfiguring a lot of what I do, sort of based on the lessons I've learned so far. both in terms of scheduling the tours I already have and possibly slightly changing up when they're scheduled. And I also have a few new tours that are coming together that I hope to start offering in like September or October that I'm going to introduce into the schedule. The research is like one of the most fun parts for me. So my hope for this is that I'm constantly creating new tours and introducing new tours.
Would you ever consider, and I know it's early days for you, you're 1 year in, but we've had some guests on the show that I'll give you an example. So Jeff launched Donut Tours in Chicago. He did it for a couple of years. It was doing really well. And then someone said, hey, why, I'd like to do this for you in Philadelphia. So he launched in Phil. He's got it in New York and rest. And I just think of other areas around the world where there's a lot of this music history. Is that something, I mean, as I say, I know it's early days, but do you think that's something you could see yourself moving into?
It is, absolutely. The one sort of caveat with all of that is that New York is uniquely, or Manhattan, I should say, is uniquely walkable in a way that a lot of other, or most other cities are not, So like I have already sort of just like as a thought experiment tentatively mapped out, a version of like an LA punk tour or even like a London thing. And by and large, it's not walkable in the same way.
And then you introduce a lot of overhead. So I guess the cool thing about your business right now is you're agile other than your time and your walking shoes.
Yeah.
Your overheads are fairly low.
It's, like kind of non-existent. Insurance and my like website fees. But because it's so low, that's why I was able to hire PR in the first place.
Yeah. And I was thinking, if you had to include transportation in that, then that's a huge headache.
Exactly. And I think you usually need an additional license to run like a bus tour.
What tools or apps are you using both, for your business and also, productivity tools or anything that you're using? So I understand you use FareHarbor for your ticketing, correct?
I do. Yeah.
How's that going?
I love them. This is the first tour company I've run, and FareHarbor is the only platform I've used for booking it, but I have no complaints. They've been great, really smooth. When I was talking to other guides, through friends, like that was the recommendation. It was like, yeah, you should use FareHarbor. FareHarbor's great. And it is. It absolutely is. At this point, I probably get like 35 to 40% of my business through Airbnb experiences, which has been really, really great. That's put it in front of people who don't necessarily know they're looking for it.
Yes.
In a way that, doesn't really happen with just like my own website.
Did they make you go through, what I've heard about Airbnb experiences is that they're really particular about who they'll work with. So they really kind of...
There's certainly a lot of things about working with them that's frustrating.
Right.
But just the pluses outweigh the minuses.
What kind of negatives are there? If you had a magic wand, what would you change from them?
Really, my big complaint with them is you absolutely have to run a tour, even if one person signs up. My standard policy through my website is like 2-person minimum. Or, if it's going to be one person, then I usually contact them in advance and, say like, oh, we can reschedule or we can make it a private tour for, like a tiny bit more or whatever. But with Airbnb, there's just no flexibility in that regard.
And I wonder, when they're going to change that. It's a big question, but I'm hearing this from a lot of tourpreneurs who, won't work with them because of the minimums. And they're even trying, from what I understand, to bring minimums in. They've now included multi-day tours. And say, you can have a minimum for somebody going on a 3-day tour, which is absolutely crazy. But I wonder when they're going to change that. If they really want to offer this, I think they have to change their policy.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I have talked to other tour guides who feel the same way.
You're not allowed to put a really, give them, say, oh yeah, it's $100 each, and then sell it for whatever on your site, right? You got to make it the same price, haven't you?
Yeah. So you end up making, a little less than you usually would because they take a cut. Which is, I knew that going in, and getting the additional business kind of makes it worth the cut.
How do they promote you? Because I've never booked an Airbnb in, it's been ages since I've done it, actually. So if I book an Airbnb, do I then get the email of, hey, here's experiences in the area? How do they promote you to the bookers?
Honestly, I have no clue. I think people have told me that they're just looking around the website. But the sort of bizarre thing with Airbnb experiences is I have 2 experiences, quote unquote, on the site. I have two of my tours. I have the Birth of Punk tour and the post-punk disco hip-hop tour. And the reason, actually, another gripe I have with them is I usually offer the Birth of Punk tour and the Indie Rock tour at the same time, which is 2 p.m., and then just whichever one gets scheduled first, the other one gets canceled. Airbnb doesn't allow for that. So I can't offer two things at the same time because they might both get booked. But the Birth of Punk tour gets booked constantly through Airbnb, and I've gotten like a ton of great reviews from it, and it just seems to keep showing up for people. But then the other one, the post-punk disco and hip-hop tour, did pretty well initially, and the first like 5 or 6 people that took it just neglected to leave reviews, even though they were like, yeah, this is great, I'm definitely gonna write a review, and they just not everybody thinks to do that. But because they didn't, now I have found that that experience is just totally buried on the site, and the only people who find it are people who have already taken the Birth of Punk tour. So I don't really understand how that works or why that works, or if there's any way to fix it.
Well, I know some people from Airbnb Experiences do listen to Tourpreneur, as do the directors at Fair Harbor. So I'm sure you're going to get some emails on the subject.
Sure.
To help you out.
Well, on that note, I should say just Airbnb, I'm generally very positive about.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But I think it's good to give them that feedback because they want to do great things in this space. You're in the trenches, you're running your own business. I think it's really important that they hear you out.
Never miss an episode of the show. Subscribe at tourpreneur.com/subscribe.
Are you working with any other OTAs like Expedia or TripAdvisor or Get Your Guide or Klook or anybody like that?
I just started working with TripAdvisor technically, which is to say that I had been working with Viator, which is the TripAdvisor OTA, just due to a programming flub. My tours weren't showing up on my TripAdvisor listing.
Oh dear.
So, and I just, I didn't know, or I didn't notice that. And so I finally did. And now increasingly they're showing up, but I haven't had anybody book me through that yet. But I have had, TripAdvisor has been very, very helpful in other ways, just because, the good reviews, and I'm proud to say that they're universally good reviews. That's really helped people who I think were on the fence about, whether this was legit or whether this was good. Having other people say not only that it is, but kind of people who make it clear in their reviews that this is something they care about and they're knowledgeable about, and then they were pleased. That's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. And, full disclosure, I worked several years at Get Your Guide. I'm not being paid to say this, but I would check them out as well because they are, very big in Europe. And as you know, there's a lot of people, particularly Brits, who love punk music that may discover you. I mean, it's always tricky for those guys, and all the OTAs, because you're such a specialty tour. It's not a Statue of Liberty boat or, Empire State Building ticket. So you will get buried. But they're all trying to do different things. And I know that they do a lot of SEM, a lot of AdWords on tour names and things. You never know, right?
No, absolutely. Just because of what you just said, that, it's not a Statue of Liberty tour. That is something that I think there's obviously pluses and minuses to that in terms of how people see it or how people find out about it. But I think the thing that I understood from the time that I spent in the music industry, that I think a lot of people in this corner of the world don't necessarily understand, is that not everything is for everybody. And there are more people out there for whom the tours I do are wildly inappropriate than, people for whom they are appropriate. The people that it's really, really for, and they really are passionate about it. They really enjoy it. And because there's that kind of threshold of interest that you have to have going in, the results end up being that much better.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm seeing a lot around the world where, and I love reading and hearing about tourpreneurs who are creating something unique. Whether it's Jeff with his donut tours through to you with post-punk and punk. And I love that I can go to a city and go on a tour like that, particularly somewhere like New York City where, I'm not particularly, I know I sound like a Philistine, I'm not particularly interested in art and stuff like that. So, I don't go to the Guggenheim, whereas friends I'm with can go to the Guggenheim. I'm coming on your tour because that's where I'm going to get a lot more out of the city. Are there any other tools or apps that you would recommend for other tourpreneurs out there that you're using?
I mean, honestly, that's kind of it so far. Airbnb, Fair Harbor, TripAdvisor, those are the things that I've been using.
Sure.
And they've been substantial enough. I just finished doing a 3-month kind of specialty tour for an app called Fever.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, I think they're based in Spain, but it's like less about tours specifically and more just like experiences that you can sign up for. I found in doing that through Fever, the people that I got were much more local, and it wasn't really so many tourists. It was like locals looking for just something to do. I think they're interesting in that regard.
Yeah, because I think about when I lived in New York, had I discovered your tour, I would have come on it,
Yeah.
as a local for sure, because it's something I'm interested in. I think there's a lot more we can do. I mean, we as an industry to marketing to locals and not just tourists.
Yeah. Well, I think people, they hear New York City walking tour and they assume that it's Statue of Liberty, or that I'm going to take people to a pizza place that they think is the wrong one or something like that. They don't necessarily think to look for something more specialty.
Sure. Were there any books that you read that helped you, particularly when you were setting up the business, to do with mindset or productivity or marketing? Were there any books that you found invaluable to you?
Specifically about the business end of things?
Yeah.
No, not really.
Wow. So you really kind of just went this on your instincts and your natural business talents from being in the music industry.
Yeah. I figured if problems arose that I'd then, figure out how to deal with them. But from the second that I had this idea, I kind of knew what to do just instinctively. I know I already said this, but I am the audience for this.
Yes.
So it's like, how would I reach me? That's been the entire motivating thought behind all of it. It's just like, how would I find this? And how would I make sure that I wanted it?
Absolutely. And I love that you give band discounts.
Yeah. People haven't taken me up on it as much as I perhaps hoped that they would. But I think it's something I'm very proud to say that I do, and something that I want to do, want to continue doing. Like, I have had a lot of people come on the tours who are musicians who have told me at the end that, they found it to be very inspiring or encouraging for them, because it's such a discouraging industry to be in, and sort of seeing firsthand how these people were able to do what they did. To come on this sort of tour, you do have to have a degree of like deification for these people. But my hope, and I think what happens, is that you walk away viewing them much more as people, and the things that happened as much less spectacular and more attainable.
Yeah, and one of the things you do, which I really appreciated, and I did this before I came on the tour, and I actually, this morning when I was doing some admin, had it on, is you have a playlist on Spotify for the Birth of Punk tour. So a lot of the bands we had been talking about, you've got their songs on there. Yeah. So it again made it feel a lot more immersive, that I was then listening to the music. I was, oh yeah, they're the Cramps.
Right.
They lived in that, and I pictured the building they lived in and practiced, and that it's the great thing with what you're doing, and particularly with it being music, is that it's immersive.
Yeah, I know. I have playlists for all the 3 like public tours that I offer, and it has been really helpful. The other kind of thing with this is, I think there's an assumption that like people don't want to hear about a band that they don't know, and I found that to be not at all true. Especially for something like this, these are people who want to find things that they don't know, and if it's a good story, it's a good story. So you're like the 3rd person I've ever had who knows who Joe Bryant is coming in, but everybody was interested.
Which is funny, because 2 months ago, I wouldn't have known who he was. Because, I mean, I've read Morrissey stuff, and I know he's mentioned before, but it went over my head. But it was only listening to Morning Starship, and then I looked into him. So it's funny how that kind of lined up.
Yeah, no, that is great.
But I really like the playlist. Is there anything we haven't shared with our audience that you think would be of value, either to someone who wants to set up a tour business or who's in the middle of running one right now?
I mean, this may sound sort of hokey and cliched, but I think the thing that's really made this good for me and successful for me, I've probably already been saying this in a roundabout way, but it's just that, like, this is the thing that I love the most in the world. I will never get bored of talking about it. I will never get sick of meeting people who are as enthusiastic about it as I am. And, because that's the case, it's a job, but it's mostly just a great pleasure to do. And I think that enthusiasm then, comes across to the customers. And so making something that is for, like I've been saying, is for me, I think that's an instinct you have to trust.
Yeah. And I mean, as I said, I was a paying customer and I came along and I was mesmerized by it all. I really, really enjoyed your tour. I got a lot out of it.
Thank you.
And for me, it's opened up, like I want to read a bit more about some of the bands and I wasn't familiar with and to delve into their back catalog. And even people like Lou Reed. Yeah, I know his main songs, but I've never really listened to his other stuff. Even New York Dolls, right? I know Trash and various others, but it's like, I should listen to more of their stuff. So it really does come across in your tour. And I guess my last question, a bit of a funny one, this, but I saw that one of your pseudonyms is Jesse Berlin.
Oh,
Oh,
you did your research.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Is that in honor of Cole Berlin?
It's not.
Okay.
It's a funny coincidence, but I, for a few years, had like a character that I was performing as that was just this like cranky lounge singer type.
Right. Yeah, that's fun.
But yeah, I actually didn't find out about Cole Berlin, which was Joe Bryatt's pseudonym, until after I'd already started doing it. And it was just like, it felt like this, delightful surprise.
Yeah.
But it's been a minute.
Okay. I did wonder when I saw it, though, that would be kind of a cool little hat tip.
Right.
So, but hey, Jesse, listen, I congratulate you on taking your passion for the music to a full-time job that everyone who's listening to the show can really hear how much, enthusiasm you have for this. And it's just superb, in this world where we're at, where when you discover someone who's really happy in their work, because let's be honest, there's a lot of us that being unhappy in our day job. So and I hope that, if people are listening to the show, your passion might be something else, food or art, whatever it may be. And, I'm hoping that you're listening to Jesse, you may actually be inspired to create your own tours in your cities and towns across the world, because, if you have the passion, that's half the battle. Jesse, thanks a million for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Would love to have you on again in the future and hear more about what you've been doing.
Yeah, anytime.
Excellent. Well, everyone, you can find those show notes to all of Jesse's tours at tourpreneur.com/20. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Tourpreneur podcast. Be sure to visit tourpreneur.com to join the conversation and access the show notes, including links to the resources mentioned on today's episode. This is Tourpreneur.